I'm Marty Kelsey. I'm one of the hosts of STEM in 30. It's a TV show produced by the National Air and Space Museum for students. All of the episodes are free, 30 minutes. They're broken into short sections that are easily digestible in a classroom. So if you don't have 30 minutes to learn about the Drake equation or Naval Test Pilot School, you can watch 3 minutes on something. We have a brand new episode that comes out tomorrow, and it's all about Naval Test Pilot School. We take you into the front seat of a couple of helicopters, and should be a lot of fun to see that. So we hope you can tune in for that. Tonight, we are joined by some of our amazing Teacher Innovator Institute teachers. We've got Keith Gaudette from Truman Middle School in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Steve Kirsch from St. Johns County School District in St. Johns, Florida, Teresa Robertson from Platte City Middle School in Parkville, Missouri. Kelsey Vollmer is a Teacher Innovator Institute fellow. And then we've got Chris Caputo, who is the Flight Test Director and Chief Experience Officer for Beta Technologies. And all of them are going to share with you some amazing stuff tonight. So we're really, really excited about this. The Teacher Innovator Institute that I just mentioned is amazing teacher professional development. So Kelsey, why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about that?
Sure thing. Let's see. I'm going to try to pull up a slide here. How's that look? All right, fantastic. So the Teacher Innovator Institute, as Marty was saying, also not to be confused, Marty Kelsey, Kelsey Vollmer. It's very confusing. But as Marty was saying, is one of NASM's fantastic teacher professional development programs that we offer. And what we do is we bring 30 STEM teachers, mostly middle school STEM teachers from across the country to Washington, D.C. for 2 weeks during the summer to learn at the National Air and Space Museum, as well as other Smithsonians, but learn about informal education techniques and how they can bring those into their classroom to really engage students. The program is awesome in that it is completely paid for, so the teachers do not have to pay for their flight or their lodging or their meals while they are here in Washington, D.C. You are also given a lot of support during the school year to bring a lot of those techniques that you learn about into your classroom. And one of the things that I have loved about being a participant is the camaraderie that you get with teachers from all over the country. So at this point, we are up to over 100 teachers who have participated in this program, and that is a network that you have access to. So if I have a question about how should I teach this lesson, or who's taught this lesson before and has ideas, you just throw it into the chat and you get all sorts of ideas coming at you. You also get a lot of support when it comes to presenting things that you've done at conferences and going to conferences with colleagues and really getting a lot out of that. So the application for the Teacher Innovator Institute will open up in mid-November. And if you want to be one of the first to learn about that, you should sign up for our teacher newsletter, which comes out at the beginning of each month. And we'll have a link to that on the Air and Space website.
And I have sat in some of those classes, and it is some of the most amazing teacher professional development that I've ever seen. And what's the best part about it are the conversations that happen during class and between class and after class with all of these incredible teachers figuring out how they're going to use it in their classrooms. So really cool stuff. You should definitely look into that, especially if you're joining us tonight. This is definitely in your wheelhouse. We do want this to be your program tonight. So if you have questions, please submit them in the chat. We're going to get to as many of them as we can, and we'll have a few Q&A sessions during the program tonight. So without further ado, I want to hand it over to Chris and let him tell you all about Beta Technologies. Chris, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Marty and Kelsey, for the awesome opening remarks. Everybody see my screen? Give me a quick thumbs up. Okay. So I'm Chris Caputo from Beta Technologies, and I just want to tell you a little bit about, my background and how I came to this awesome company. So Beta is an electric sustainable aerospace manufacturing company. We're currently building 2 aircraft that we have prototypes for that are all electric, and we're literally trying to change the world in the aviation. So my background prior military aviator, 30 plus years, spent some time at Delta Airlines. My last job was over at the Vermont Air National Guard, where I retired flying F-16s, and I got introduced to Kyle Clark and just fell in love with this mission. And having been involved in aviation and very passionate about the climate and sustainability, what this company is doing, I think, is just incredibly important for the future of aviation, for the future of our planet. So we're just going to talk a little bit about the company and, maybe inspire some of the folks here in this panel to think a little differently about how to structure teaching in academia and curriculum going forward. So I'll go to the next slide here and just give you an idea about what we do here. So, like I said, we're an aerospace company that is really focused on changing the way we move products, boxes, organs, medical supplies, and people around the world. We are not only just developing a platform to do that, we are also rolling out an entire charging network that is multimodal, that can be capable of charging electric vehicles and also electric aircraft. We have a system, an operational system that is currently in use, and we'll talk a little bit about that throughout this brief. That is a really important part of our ground game as we roll out this new technology. And we also think a lot about the flight training aspect of it, the pilot training and the maintenance training. So we're not just building the platform that you see here. This is serial number 1, the tail number you see on the side, November 250 Uniform Tango. Has a lot of meaning and significance to us. The 250 stands for 250 nautical miles of being able to fly that distance on a single charge, and UT stands for our launch customer, United Therapeutics, who we've partnered with, and one of our vertical entries into the marketplace. And we'll talk a little bit later on about that company. So we're just going to introduce you to Aaliyah. Aaliyah is the name of our aircraft. We think she's quite beautiful and elegant. You can see on the upper right side, as you think about trying to solve some really challenging engineering problems, looking to nature to help you solve some of those, biomimicry. And Kyle, when he was first designing this aircraft, took a look at the Arctic tern, that is one of the longest migrating birds in the world, that'll fly from the North Pole all the way to the South Pole. And that's actually the shape and the design that you see right there. It's very similar to the Arctic tern. Some of the specifications over in the upper left are the aircraft is really designed, mainly focused on kind of the cargo logistics. And initially with United Therapeutics, it was really focused on organ transportation and helping Martine Rothblatt at that company solve some of her organ delivery transportation issues. Those specifications are not all mutually inclusive. It does have a very large cargo area, about 250 cubic feet. It can carry up to 1,400 payloads. In the passenger configuration, it'll have 6 total seats. One of those seats will be a piloted position. Like we said, the 250 nautical mile range is super important. Having meaningful range on an all-electric aircraft is really important to make it commercially viable. And it is capable of 150 knots at a max, max high-end speed. But we're more operating in kind of the helicopter speed range of about 110 knots is kind of the sweet spot. Our goal is to have this be able to recharge in under an hour on our charging network that we'll talk about here in a second. And we're really focused on taking this super simple, pragmatic, kind of utilitarian approach when we look to electrify aviation. And what we believe, the best way to do that is kind of this lift plus cruise concept. So you see the 4 lift rotors, propellers on top of the aircraft, and the 1 pusher propeller in the back. Those 4 lift propellers lift the aircraft off vertically, and then it flies on that pusher propeller that's in the back. And it gets on that wing of the airplane, and we turn off the 4 lift motors to maximize the range of the aircraft. So you can't have an electric aircraft if you don't really have a charging network to support that. So we've heavily invested in the infrastructure to go along with that charging network. Up at the top of that picture on the top of the slide, that is showing what we call kind of our airport in a box solution. So we are selling that kind of setup to our customers right now, United Therapeutics and UPS and the Air Force and the armies of the world. And they're putting those in strategic locations. And then what we're doing is we're going to all of these smaller airports throughout the country and installing that charging cube that you see in the bottom of the screen in that picture. And we're providing that mesh network so that, when these aircraft are certified and fielded into service, that they have the capability to operate freely. It's a pretty cool system. The upper picture, totally modular. We use shipping containers. We receive those shipping containers. We manufacture that structure, and then we deliver it to our customers. And that'll be kind of their proprietary kind of home base. But the smaller piece that you see in the cube, those will be able to be used by anybody. And we talk about multimodal solutions on the charging side. You're going to be able to charge, whether it's a delivery van, your Tesla, an electric aircraft, an Alia, a Pipistrel, off of our charging solution. So that's a big part of our business. What you see right here is kind of a schematic of what we are rolling out right now on the nationwide level in our charging infrastructure. That green line delineates several of our operational chargers that we recently just flew one of our prototype on an experimental research and development certificate halfway across the country. So we left our flight test facility over in Plattsburgh, New York, and we flew down to Rutland, over to Rome, New York, over to Jamestown, New York, Akron, Ohio, Springfield, Ohio, through Indiana into Illinois, and then ended up in Bentonville, Arkansas. We were there for the Transport Up conference for several days, and then we flew the aircraft all the way back. And I think it just kind of shows the mindset behind this company of being very focused on a practical approach to electric aviation and going out there and executing and letting the engineering piece of what we're trying to develop tell the story. So we hear a lot from folks, well, electric aviation, really can't exist. Well, I'm telling you, having been in the aerospace industry for 30 plus years, I know it can exist because I was part of this journey as we flew across the country. And, as we're flying, safety chase in a Cessna Caravan along the way, and we're stopping at our charging locations and fueling up a Alia at $17 a pop, and it's costing us over $700 in jet fuel to fill up the Caravan. It just kind of helps you realize, the access to this, Z dimension can be done in a really, sustainable way and in a low cost way and do it very safely. So that's really what we're trying to do here at Beta Technologies. And this charging aspect of it is a key component. So some of our committed customers and the contracts, just to kind of illustrate that this isn't, smoke and mirrors. We are actually engaged with commercial companies that feel the engineering and the work that we've done has been validated a lot by some of our experimental flight tests. So in the defense area, we have got a great relationship with the United States Air Force and the United States Army through a program called Agility Prime under AFWorks, that they help a lot with funding of our flight test, and in exchange for that investment, we're able to provide them data so that they can learn about the electrification of aviation and our flight controls and how we've incorporated a entire carbon fiber composite structure. It's just been an incredible relationship that we're going to continue to, nurture as we go forward. I think we've got about a $48 million contract with the Department of Defense right now. And that investment from the Department of Defense has allowed us to go out to the market and turn that into about $800 million in investment from private equity. On the cargo side of things, we've got committed contracts from UPS that, is obviously one of the largest cargo and logistics operators in the world. LCI, one of the, largest leasing companies in the world. Bristow, they're the folks that, do a lot of the offshore transport of folks out to oil rigs in the Gulf, and one of the largest operators of rotary wing aircraft in the world. These folks are really thinking about how to, augment, the way they move goods and people into their own business model and do it in a more sustainable way. On the medical side, United Therapeutics obviously is our launch customer. Martine and Kyle, the CEO of Beta Technologies, have been very good friends from early on. And the relationship we have with Martine and her company is just absolutely phenomenal. So here you have a woman that, started a company bound and determined to save her daughter's life, who had a rare form of pulmonary arterial hypertension, and started investing in pharmaceuticals to find a cure for her. But ultimately, she needed a lung transplant to be saved. And Martine built this multi-billion-dollar company called United Therapeutics, and her goal is to make sure that no human ever dies awaiting, a lung, a kidney, or a heart transplant in the future, and how to get those organs to those people and do it in a sustainable way. That's kind of how the history and the origin of Beta Technologies was born. So it's just been a great relationship for us, teaming up with United Therapeutics in the medical field. And then obviously, what we think will be a follow-on to, defense and cargo and the medical will be the passenger industry. And we have a contract with Blade currently in the air mobility. The other aspect of this that I think is really important, and if you think about, the United States of America and how fortunate we are to have over 5,500 public use airports, the infrastructure that is invested in by the federal government that is just expansive. It doesn't exist anywhere in the world, but it is completely and utterly underutilized. So we're trying to go in there and electrify some of these more rural, Class C and Class D airports and help connect, rural America and get better access to delivery of, as e-commerce has exploded, to delivery of goods, to access to medical care, to freedom to move about and experience, flight firsthand. And that's gonna come as you electrify aviation and completely break down the barrier to accessing that Z dimension. Just due to the lower operating costs, the lower maintenance costs. So that's really another important aspect of where we're going in the future. This is a picture of Aaliyah, serial number 1, that's flying all the way across in the United States as it's en route to Bentonville, Arkansas. That rural theme, these are some of the airports that we stopped at and recharged with our own rechargers. And we also had a mobile charging solution as we were heading out to Bentonville. Just goes to show that this technology is here. It's real. We're flying a lot on these 2 prototype aircraft. And we are super excited about the progress and what it means to the future of aviation and trying to do something really great for our environment and the next generations. These are some of the recent milestones that our company has accomplished. We're not out there kind of beating our chest and bragging about these things in the media. We just are trying to stay super hyper focused as we continue to, advance the technology, make it safer, make it, better range, better payload, on our path to getting a certified aircraft, working with our regulatory environment, the FAA, where we work with them daily almost. We've got an entire team that's been engaged with the FAA from early on. And then you can see a lot of the milestones that we've accomplished with, a vote of confidence from, our partners in the United States Air Force and the United States Army, where they've allowed some of their pilots to actually come here, go through training with our flight test team and actually fly the aircraft. So I think that just speaks volumes about, where we're at and the vote of confidence from the Department of Defense and the FAA to achieve some of these milestones. And I'll finish with this last picture here. This is serial number 2. And that, when I stop sharing the screen, I'll show you the background here. What you'll see is serial number 2. But back on Mother's Day, we just hovered and we do a lot of our vertical flight test campaign with this aircraft, and it was just a huge milestone for the company. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'll just I'm here at Burlington, Vermont, in our R&D facility, and over my shoulder you can see there's serial number 2 down on our hangar floor, and a bunch of the aircraft that we have in the company that we invest in a lot of glass here, and what we try to instill in our teammates is a little bit of transparency and making sure people are staying connected with one another here at the company and connected with the mission that we're on to try to revolutionize aviation. So with that, I'll just open it up to questions, and hopefully I didn't go too long, Marty.
No, Chris, that was awesome. The stuff that you all are doing is so exciting. We've got a couple of questions here, and then everybody that's tuning in, please put those questions in the chat. The first one I want to ask is, can you compare this to electric cars?
You can actually. I think what you're seeing happening in the passenger vehicle and the explosion of electric aviation and electric vehicles first and electric aviation next. But I always equate it to, I'm a big sports fan, and I watch the Super Bowl a lot, and my wife loves, the commercials. And you saw in the last Super Bowl, each commercial, 30-second ads, about $6 to $7 million a pop. And I think 75 to 80% of the ads were all about electric vehicles, whether it was Ford, GMC, Chevy, Kia, obviously Tesla. The investment in the electrification of passenger vehicles is pretty massive. Rivian. It's really exciting to see how the energy density in these lithium ion batteries and the safety features that are baked into that technology have allowed that industry to really explode and take off. And it's going to do something really great for the environment. So where we're at on the aviation side is these culminating technologies of fly-by-wire, carbon fiber composite structures that are super lightweight and very high strength, and the high energy density in the same exact lithium ion cell batteries that are being used in electric vehicles, and how we're able to package those up in a super safe, reliable, airworthy package and incorporate that into an aircraft. We are learning a lot from the automotive industry on this. We have several of our high-end engineers that have come to us from Tesla, from Rivian, that have learned how to incorporate this technology into a super safe, reliable, battery pack, and then how we expand on that to, we're seeing, cars that are able to go 350, 370 miles on a single charge. And now we're flying almost a 6,000 pound aircraft, 255 nautical miles through the air on the same cell chemistry that's being operated in vehicles. So I think it's just a great synergy that's happening, a lot of great collaboration in the industries. And it's exciting to see what the future holds.
Awesome. Well, teachers that are joining us, please put those questions in the chat. Steve, Teresa, Keith, let me turn it over to you. Do you all have some questions?
Oh, I absolutely do.
Go for it.
I am so excited. I took so many notes because I teach a design and modeling class where my students are engineers, and they have to design for students with disabilities. And we work that empathy part. And so the stuff you were talking about, just even with the medical use that this could provide, is just, I think that would just be fascinating for my sixth graders. But my question actually was so what kind of design challenges did you have as you started making these prototypes and using these different components that haven't been put together before?
Well, I joined the company about 3.5 years ago, and there were 25 engineers here. I was probably one of the first, although I have an engineering background, I was one of the first non-engineers hired to the company. And my primary role initially was to provide flight instruction. Kyle, the CEO founders, he's super passionate aviator. And if you look at, the automobile industry, and we've got all these super smart engineers that are designing automobiles of the future, and they've been driving their entire life. Very few aerospace engineers that are designing aircraft of the future have ever flown. So getting the team connected to the mission was incredibly important early on. So when Kyle was designing and building his first aircraft called Ava, that was an 8-bladed articulating aircraft with water cooling and gearboxes and commercial off-the-shelf electric motors, what it taught him and the team, more importantly, was, yes, this electric aviation is possible, and vertical takeoff and land to the Z dimension is possible. But it taught him how incredibly important it was to simplify the approach. Keep it simple. In the military, we always had the KISS principle. We said, keep it simple, stupid, right? Just simplify the design. And our tagline here is, just simple enough to be revolutionary. So he's just reeled back the design, and we've gotten to first principles engineering. So the articulation of the rotor blades, going to air cooling versus water cooling. With liquid cooling, you have pumps that fail, you have gearboxes, with the electric motors off the shelf. So starting with the electric propulsion system and then designing the entire aircraft around that to be able to get to the ranges that we had. So there were a lot of trade-offs early on, and now I think we're at a point where we've got a design of an aircraft that's going to be able to close and have some really meaningful effects and commercial applicability for our customers. So, I hopefully that answered your question a little bit. But there were a lot of design choices early on, and it's always a trade-off. But if you constantly think about, not basing those decisions on emotion and really looking at the data and trying to overcome any mental inertia, from, once you have a problem and you're trying to innovate and get to a solvable solution. And at some point, as you innovate, the design's going to get more complex, right? And then eventually you're going to find a solution to that problem, and you're going to rely on physics and the engineering to get to a solution. But we talk a lot about here at the company of overcoming the mental inertia to just give up at the time you get to the solution. And what's really important for us is to drive down into the details, to get to the lowest energy state, simplest solution that you can, so that now you can remove the complexity, and now you're end up with a much simpler design that has more empathy with the customers that you're delivering the product to.
That's
right.
awesome.
And we talk a lot about empathy and relating to our customers and really understanding what their needs are. And hence the reason we have all these different aircraft back here, so that our machinists and our maintainers and our engineers can, understand what they like and what they don't like about these various aircraft, and how to machine a part that's going to be more manufacturable for our production folks.
And I think that's a big deal too, to have the end user in mind, even for students. When you're giving them a design challenge, think about who's going to use this, how are they going to use it? Because I think a lot of times kids get so wrapped up in what's the cool thing, how can we do this, and they don't think about what that end product is. Steve and Keith, I'm going to get to you guys in just a second. We did have a question from Dr. Sherlock, and she wanted to know, what kind of materials are these made out of?
So the entire structure is all carbon fiber composite. The motors themselves, we rely on rare earth magnets and copper, obviously. The batteries are lithium ion. So really what Beta Technologies is focused on, and what our company is our core technologies are the electric propulsion system, the inverters, the power electronics that convert the DC energy from the lithium ion batteries into three-phased AC that drives the electric motors. So it's the motors, the power electronics, and the packaging of lithium ion. And then obviously the carbon fiber composite structure. That's not what we do best. So we partnered with, a tier 1 supplier that is building the structure for us. So I think that's another really key piece is, we constantly talk here about, let's stay focused on what we know we can do better than anybody in the world. And then those areas where we aren't the best in the world, we go out and we find the best in the world, and we partner with them as long as they have the same aligned values that we here at Beta Technologies have.
That's amazing. So now we're going to hand it off to Steve and Keith, and they're going to talk a little bit about drones in the classroom. Chris, we'd love you to stick around. We'll do some more questions here in a little bit, but Steve and Keith, take it away.
All right, well, I will go ahead and take over. So What Keith and I want to talk about now, it was awesome hearing about Beta's ALIA aircraft. It's just amazing what you guys have accomplished, Chris, and we think that's incredible. And what we want to talk about is bringing drones into the classroom, because to have the technology, to have a system like what Beta is making, we've got to get those skills into our students so that they can help maintain it and keep it and to understand it. So we want to talk about a drone curriculum that we've made as part of the Teacher Innovator Institute, and some ways that you can bring all aspects of STEM into it using that. So when we talk about it overall, because one of my side jobs, besides being a teacher, is I work with NASA developing curriculum for their aeronautics directorate, and they're working on a system called Advanced Air Mobility, which is going to incorporate aircraft such as drones, such as ALIA, and a whole bunch of others. And what it is essentially those aircraft, a lot of those aircraft aren't going to fit into the traditional air traffic control system that's been around. They fly lower, they fly slower, they fly usually under 400 feet, especially for the drones, and the radar cannot necessarily pick it up and see them. So that system is sort of a basis of a lot of the curriculum that we've put together. So when we talk about bringing drones, when we talk about bringing electrified aircraft into the airspace, we've already heard a lot about future vehicles, which is amazing, but we also want to look at the drone side of things. You've heard a lot, I'm sure, about deliveries using drones. I know, for example, there's a WakeMed Hospital up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they have a center that's away from their lab. And they used to collect all the blood samples over the course of the day, send them over at the end of the day, and get the results the next day. And now they actually utilize drones to be able to bring it over several times throughout the day, which is increasing how effective they can be with their patients. And so we see that. We see drones being used by fire departments to be able to go and look for hot spots in buildings, et cetera. We see so many different uses for these vehicles in the future. But in order for them to all work, it's really about control systems. And so that's the basis of how we want to come up with ways to bring it into your classroom. And so there's a link here, which will be on a link of resources at the end as well for the overall curriculum that we've done. But we want to talk a little bit about bringing in the science, bringing in the coding, bringing in the engineering, bringing in the math, et cetera. So when we talk about the aerodynamics, many of our students are familiar at least with the basics of fixed wing aircraft and how they have lift, weight, thrust, and drag. And when we look at future aircraft, some of that's still going to be there. For example, looking at ALIA, you can see how it had the propeller on the back, it had the wings, so it's using some of that fixed wing aerodynamics, but it's also utilizing the aerodynamics that we see with drones. Students are quite fascinated when you look at this picture of the drone on the right, and we've got 4 propellers that spin. They're all facing the same direction, they don't turn. You can't face them to the right, to the left, or anything else. And yet with that, we can go up, down, side to side, forward, backward, and even rotate on a plane. And so the link at the bottom of the slide, which is, you can access the NASA curriculum on the science behind the drones and getting into how that happens. And I found with my own students, they really think that's cool. They think it's like, whoa, this is really neat the way it works. And that's why for me personally, I've always loved aviation as a hook and an engagement for my students, because it's something that almost seems magical, but they can understand it. And so we'd encourage you to use that with your students to inspire them and to come up with new ways of using that technology, similar to what Beta has done with taking drone technology and bringing it to an incredibly huge next level. The other thing is when we talk about the mathematics involved, because I've been a math teacher, I've been a science teacher, and I know, like with my kids with math, they have a hard time sometimes really caring about it because they don't see the real world application of it. And when we talk about advanced air mobility and we talk about these control systems, The aircraft Chris talked about is a piloted vehicle, but many of the vehicles going to be flying are autonomous. So they're going to be flown just by computers. And to do that, we have to have a system to get them around. So this is showing you sort of a theory. So if you look in the top left, you have an aerial photograph, and then off to the right, you see what a map version of that would be. But if I want to be able to give directions of where to go, I need to have a reference point. I need to have somewhere that I go from. So you can see in the bottom left, what we've done is we've overlaid a grid on this. And then one of the resources that NASA has available is called flight control math, and it takes them through a bunch of levels. What you see here would be one of the culminating activities in a plotting exercise. And so you see the yellow areas are what we call geofences. They're areas that drones and other such aircraft aren't allowed to fly into. And the points are points that they would need to go to, whether it's doing a delivery to a house or going to a vertiport or an airport. And you can see by plotting, you can come up with all of these courses. And you can see the red line would be, okay, I need to go from point A up to 1113, and I need to go around that geofenced area. So it's a way to take math and bring it to the kids in a way that they're like, oh, okay, I can see why I'm plotting points now. And that gives us a lot more buy-in, as those of us, those of you that are teachers know, if they feel like there's a reason for doing it, they're much more likely to want to do it. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Keith, and he's going to talk a little bit more about some specific ways to bring drones into your classroom.
All right, let me just share that screen like Steve was just on here. And so one of the hardest things that teachers often do when they decide they want to go ahead and bring drones into the classroom is, what do I do? Where do I get started? And that was a common theme that I've had talks with many teachers about. What do they do with the drone? So the first one is obviously what I believe is the best educational drone that's on the market right now that is cost effective for schools, and that is this DJI Telodrone. Yeah, this is considered the basic version, which is about $99 from Amazon or even the DJI website. There's also a DJI Telo EDU version, which is $50 more, and that gives a few more bells and whistles. It comes with a launch pad. It has the ability to talk to the other drone to create a swarm style mode. And it does also have a few other coding capabilities that the basic model does not. But the basic model is a great starter drone. You can fly 5, 7, 8 drones right there within your classroom, assuming you guys can make sure that everything's within safety parameters. And that brings me to my second point, is the drone safety. I really emphasize drone safety within my own classroom. I do recommend, though, when you're dealing with K through 8 students, that you have a simple set of rules that these kids can follow. And there's a great assessment that you can have students do. Once you go over these rules, you can have the students make posters that emphasize these points. You could have a Google Forms that is just a general safety quiz. There's a lot of ways to bring learning about drone safety into the classroom and ensuring that the kids know the rules and that they will follow. Now, high school students, on the other hand, you still can have those drone classroom rules, but I would also advise that, especially since high schoolers are 14, 15 and higher with their age, they can start taking something called the trust test, TRUST. And this is an FAA mandated for all drone users now. It just started within the last couple of years. You can go to the FAA website, which we did include in a resource section that we have at the very end. It is roughly about a 25, 30 question test, multiple choice. And it comes from a variety of partners. The Boy Scouts of America, for example, they have the drone test within their website so that you can have students just go log on and type your name in, and then you will get a little pass, if you will, a license that says that you are very aware of what the FAA and their rules are with them. Other things I definitely recommend that teachers do within the classrooms is have landing zones maps, if you will, roped off with the correct flight path that you will be using. This ensures that kids stay within outside those parameters, and kids will be wearing safety goggles to ensure, because propellers can bounce off the walls and fly out. So I emphasize that goggles need to be on. The last thing that really turns some teachers away from using drones, and I wish it wouldn't, and that is make sure you do a hardware and software check. And it's something that teachers will learn right off the bat. But it also is a good way to teach kids, because when you do fly professionally with drones, you have a checklist that you have to go through and ensure that you are within flight parameters, much like what pilots do in the real world. They have a set of safety checklists that they have to go through. But definitely make sure that your hardware is, the firmware is up to date, and your software, such as like your iPads, Chromebooks, are using the latest operating system. When it comes to coding, this is actually one of my specialties. I love using the coding aspects of the drones rather than just free fly. When it comes to using the Tello drone, there are 5 basic apps that I use within my classroom. The Tello app is the main app. The Tello EDU app, that has the ability to do a lot of block-based coding within the app. One of my favorite ones to use, especially if you are working with more younger students, is Swift Playground app. Within Swift Playground, which is operated by Apple, it has small little achievements that the students can use. Once again, it still uses a block-based programming, but it focuses on the Swift programming languages. It brings the level of the understanding of what coding is all about down to an understanding for the students to comprehend. The Drone Block app is a favorite out of a lot of teachers, and that is another block-based, Blockly-based app, and it mimics the same as using Scratch. And Scratch is another very popular app that coders will use to introduce to their students. Now, when we were part of the Teachers Innovative Institute this past summer, we got a chance to teach teachers how to start using the Tello drones within the classroom, but we also presented them with a series of projects and challenges. And one of the things that we started off with is it was a great introductory on how to just program. And the drone challenges, and my screen should be a split screen here, so hopefully you guys will still see it here, is basically you give the kids a set of simple tasks that start off as easy and it works its way up to very challenging. For example, the first one is move the drone to a height of just 2 meters and just land. And this is what you do when you use one of these Blockly style apps, Drone Blocks, the Tello EDU app. You just basically program it so that it will go up, hover, and then land. You can start elevating it to, okay, I want you to take off. You fly to a certain point and then just land. And you keep working your way up till they get the idea of what programming and coding is about. So for the last one, we could have it where let the kids come up with their own challenge, and that they have to have another group within the classroom do and try. The second level is what we call a drone field day or drone Olympics. This is really starting to take off, especially within after school clubs. And what this does is you can have the teachers and students alike, because it will show ownership of what they do within the project, is they can do things like a high jump, for example, and we call it a programming activity. So they position their drones on top of a table, and they had to have it leap over, say, a bar, or leap up in the air and do a little flip and land on the ground. But it all had to be coded. Another activity, for example, would be a 400-meter run. So what we did when we demonstrated this to our 2019 group was we had them position around in a hallway, and they had to go in a circle and see who can free fly it the best. And that was a fun thing to watch the kids and do along with adults, trying to see if they can maneuver using the iPad or a remote control and take the sharp corners around. Archery is another example. It could be just a hula hoop or some sort of circular loop that they target and try to get through. But this is another free fly. They have to do it in a direct line. A 3-person relay where you just hand off the iPad to somebody else, and they go in a nice circle and relay that drone from one person to the next. Diving is another example where it could be a programming. So, but you can definitely get the student to come up with their own events or field day event and do it within your classrooms, within the halls, within the gym, cafeteria. The third one and final one that kind of ties it all back into today's presentation about aerospace and planes. And this is where you can use your drone to create a flying car. And this actually is something within the NASA curriculum that Steve just talked about. We ended up, for our teachers, we ended up giving them a series of requirements. They had to have some sort of like a capsule that would host one of these Pop Funko figurines that were about 2-3 inches tall, and they would sit inside of it. And it would balance within on the drone, and you had to either A, program it, or you free fly it, depending on your comfort level. And they had to design some sort of module that will transport that Pop Funko character or some other little character from point A to point B. We had certain rules. The drone may not land with the compartment touching the ground. We had to have it completely decorated. You could have windows that would be part of it. You could even offer a greater challenges because of the weight. What if you put in an additional Pop Funko character? And are you able to get that lift? Here are some of the pictures that we took when we did this with the teachers. The one on the left is she was just using the iPad and the drone, and it had to do a nice little diving. So it had to elevate off that table, do a flip, and land on the floor. You see Steve instructing a series of instructors in the second picture. The third one with the cone, this was part of our 400-meter dash. You had to go around the cone and fly it back. And you can see an example from the last picture of one person's idea for a drone car where they had to use some straws. They created a little basket for the Pop Funko characters, and they had to find a way to hold it onto the drone itself. It was really a fun-filled day, a lot of engagement. There was propellers that did fall off, because they misjudged how much space they had or the weight of their characters. And this is the reason why I do really emphasize safety goggles within the classroom, just for that purpose of protection. So the big question is, why drones? Why do we use them in the classroom? What purpose does it have? And there's all kinds of things. The drone world is really taken off. Starting with GIS and mapping, photography. I've been seeing a lot of that even in my own neighborhood, where we have people real estate, they come by, they take an aerial shot of the property to use it to sell to their customers. Home and land inspection. If you've got hail damage on your roof, you can't get yourself up on a ladder. Obviously, you can have inspectors use a drone, take pictures of the damage on that roof. Entertainment, this would be anywhere from film. We here at Albuquerque, we just finished up with our 50th annual International Balloon Fiesta. And one of the highlights of that show was a drone show. They had this company that was based out of Pennsylvania, I believe it was, and they came in, ended up doing a 10-15-minute presentation using 300 drones and did all kinds of aerial stunts up in the air and with moving pictures. Agriculture, construction, journalism, we can do it just for commercial reasons, delivery, and of course, our own professional as well, teaching. So Steve will talk a little bit about how the NASA drone curriculum is set up as we have it designed up on the screen here.
All right, so like Keith said, this is the curriculum that we put together. You can see sort of a snapshot of it. And if you go to that link, it'll take you through all of the documents, all of the resources you'll need for it. And so something you're welcome to use, something again that we developed through the Teacher Innovator Institute, and hopefully something that would be useful for your classroom. And so with that, we think we're going to turn it back over to Teresa to talk about, and Marty to move on to the next section of our program.
Yeah, we're getting ready to talk about careers in aviation with Teresa. I do want to point out that I put in the chat a link to a video that we produced about students programming their own air show. What kids can do with these drones is absolutely stunning. They had choreographed their own music. They were flying around. We had one that was Romeo and Juliet, and one flew up way high, and one was down low, circling around. It was really, really great stuff. So check that out. But let's hand it off to Teresa. And remember, ask us the questions. When Teresa's done, we'll open it up to everybody for questions. So Teresa, take it away.
Thank you. I just want to say, hey, Steve and Keith, thanks for the stuff this summer, because I'm starting drones on Monday. And I'm very excited to incorporate all of this. And I'm also a little bit uncomfortable, so we'll see what happens, but I think we'll do okay. So I want to talk about careers in aviation. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Where did it go? Oh, I was looking at the video too. So with my sixth graders, obviously career planning should start in middle school. We all talk about that all the time. Middle school is kind of the hub to start getting their brains, getting into ideas of what they think they want to do, or things that just excite or engage them. So I just looked through and just talked about how important it is for us to talk to middle school students about careers. Usually it comes to the counselor, and the counselor has they fill out the form. What do I like? What do I not like? And then it pops out careers that they might be interested in. But I like to incorporate them in my classroom. And I just wanted to kind of share how I do that. And so activities that I do in my classroom with my sixth graders, I am, how do I put it? Not afraid to ask anyone to come and talk to my students. So Chris, get ready, because you'll be getting, I'm sure, an email from me. And I love to bring in professionals. So the first one is like an interest and preference questionnaire that you see on here. But my actual questionnaires go to parents. I put them in emails. I ask parents, hey, what do you do? Hey, what do people in your family do? Does anybody have anything involved with flight and space or engineering? And I can't even tell you the resources you probably have within your kids. My students have Skyped with a person from NASA in charge of entry, descent, and landing on Mars. I had an aerospace engineer from NASA come and talk to my students about, like in person, talk to my students about the Artemis mission that they're about to launch, try to launch again, November 14th, I think is the date they're going again. So I've had the people in front of them, my students, and been able to ask questions. But the ones I get from parents, I've had parents who have kids who have uncles that run drone companies, and they'll get on and Skype with a class. And not even just in aviation or space, like in my design and modeling class with my 7th graders, they build foot orthoses for students with cerebral palsy. And we actually Skyped with a prosthetic, a guy who makes the prosthetics and the orthoses for those kids. And so anytime you can get a Skype session going, or you can get the kids to actually talk to the real professionals, I think is the most important thing. So classroom speakers, number 1 on my list right there. We have job shadowing. We have kids that go with their parents, take your kid to work day. And then mentorships. Shockingly, I have a 6th grader. I was shocked, maybe you guys won't be, but who is he's already certified in scuba up to, I think, like 20 feet or 50 feet or something crazy. And then I had the opportunity to go to Space Center Houston and go to the neutral buoyancy lab, where we met a diver. I was able to hook the diver up with my student in 6th grade via email, and she could mentor him and answer any of his questions he had about a possible career in that. So that was super exciting. And we were able to do that stuff. So I love talking about careers. The activity that I wanted to share with you is I do a research project. Now, kids look at it and you go, oh, research, I hate research, because I have 6th graders. But I tried to make it there's a hook to it. I try to make it very independent. I like them to show me their skills. I like them to have choice. And I also like a little bit of inquiry in it. So in my research project for this one, I make them guess the topic. So I throw up a bunch of crazy facts, like it's estimated that there are between 1.5 and 2.3 million pilots in the world. So then I say, hey, what do you think your research project is about? Yeah, they're going to say pilots. And I go, oh, interesting. And then I put up the next slide. The Boeing 747 has 6 million parts. Oh, maybe we're going to talk about the plane. Okay, yeah, maybe the plane. All right. And then I keep going just with crazy stuff. So aeronautical engineers work with aircraft. So what's an aeronautical engineer? And we just have class discussions about all of this. And I just let them continue to formulate ideas. Sometimes I have them write down their ideas as we go in between. Sometimes it's just a gigantic class discussion. Ranchers hire pilots to monitor and count the herd. Like, that's super important. And kids have no idea that that's even done in some places. Hopefully they're not all watching Yellowstone. So the next one I have, though, not all air traffic controllers work at the airport. So hopefully they're getting this idea that we're just talking about kind of jobs within that happen at airports, that happen with in aviation. And then, oh, this is the best video. In order to simulate bird strikes, airlines use so-called chicken guns to shoot frozen chicken carcasses straight into the engine. And I found this information and I thought, okay, my 6th graders, I have them hooked now, because I'm just going to show them a video of, some chicken getting stuck in an engine. Then we,
what on earth is this?
I'm not going to make you guys watch that video. What is, then I ask them, guess, what do you think the topic is for your research? I give them 2 minutes to talk to their table partner, to guess, defend it. Why do you think? And then we have a sharing session. For fun, I found this really funny aviation quiz, and I love to give them quizzes that are pretty simple. So this one is you just pick pictures and it tells you what career did you get? And it's only pilots. And the reason I did an aviation quiz for only pilots is because that's usually what they think is the only job in aviation. So it tells them if they're going to be a fighter pilot or a commercial pilot, that kind of stuff. And so they'll share those results. And then we talk about, then here's another hint. Who can tell me what aviation is? And just throw that word at them so they get used to the idea. We talk a lot about aerospace in my classroom, but we don't necessarily talk about the word aviation. So just to get them talking about the vocabulary. And then we go through what the answer is. And then I make sure they understand it's not limited to pilots and planes before they get into kind of, so hopefully I've got their wheels turning, I've got their ideas. They're kind of like, okay, wait, I didn't know this. Oh, maybe this. And then we get into, hey, get with a partner, brainstorm a list of as many jobs that you can think of that are part of aviation. And we'll get this whole big gigantic list. Because when 6th graders research, sometimes they get stuck on a topic where they go, oh, I just don't want to research anything, or oh, I'm not really interested. And then you show a story about like a chicken gun, and now you have them hooked. And so just this idea that they can talk about different types of jobs. and what people are doing. Then I give them the guidelines. Basically, choose a career in aviation, complete the research page, and I'll show you the research page I have them do because they still are in 6th grade. I don't just free for all it. They do. I try to narrow their scope down a little bit, but I do let them do a presentation of their choice. I love movies. I love it when they make a movie for me. Sometimes they are so creative. And then brochures, because I have a lot of kids that are artists. Some like posters, some like to build the Patoon cartoons. So with my technology integration stuff, I let them kind of explore however they're going, they would be able to present and express. And then if they have something different they really want to do, then, hey, come talk to me about it. And then I give them the expectations for their presentation. We then start, so they know like, okay, I'm researching a career. So I've given you guys a bunch of these links, drone careers, non-flying careers, jobs from the FAA. They can look and I'll show you one of them. So this one is, I found a great infographic where it just kind of lists everything that happens in an airport, everything that's science and technology. You can see it has all the engineering degrees. You would need an engineering degree. Up here, sheet metal fabrication, you only need a high school diploma. So just ideas, we have some students that are definitely career ready, that are going to go into a 4-year program after high school. And then we have some that aren't. They're going to go into the tech round and they're going to go that direction. And so they aren't going to do the 4-year program. So trying to just get them exposed to all of these. So you can see just a wide range. Here's the one thing I noticed that's not on here. Hey, drone pilot, not on here yet. So I did include with them, there's drone careers, lists of drone careers. And then I really liked this site that I found that it goes through the different types like maintenance experts, and then you have aviation managers and stuff. Just exploration. They get to go through and explore, find things that they think sound interesting and research them a little bit. Then at the very bottom, you can see, I said, are there careers in the future to explore? That one is really hard to do because you know that in the next 5 years, we're going to have a whole nother 100 set of different careers as a beta company continues to grow. So they will be exposed to more things as they go through. So I do let them, hey, if you find something that's not on any of those lists, please, if it's more interesting and you're really thinking it, you're interested in it, let me know. And then they complete their research page is super simple. It's, oh, oops, sorry. I thought I had it open already. It's just a table and it's just, here are some exploratory questions for you to look up for your things. Things like, hey, what kind of degree do you have to have? Do you have to have a degree? Where do people work? And it just gives them also though, 4 more resources, another set of resources they can go to. Oh, goodness sakes, loading slow. Anyways, so there's more resources down there. So I don't prefer my students to Google right away. I prefer to give them something to guide them before they just automatically throw things into Google. And that's it. And that's what they do. They have there we go, expectations. Their presentation has to be interesting. That's a super important thing to me. The information has to be in there. The pacing is appropriate, but I really want them to focus on the audience and what we are going to learn from them in the audience. And then they complete a self-evaluation form for me. And that is basically what I do with aviation careers. I do the same type of project also with my engineering kids. I think, did my internet go out during that?
You were a little fuzzy for a second, but it's all good. We could hear you the whole time.
Okay, because I was like, wait, everything's stopping. I do the same type of activity with engineering. So I have an engineering quiz for my engineering students and what kind of engineer would you be? So they get aerospace, they get environmental, electrical, and that can also be incorporated because all of those engineers work with aviation as well. So just trying to tie all of that together. And that's kind of what I do in my classroom. And I cannot wait to start next week. And I can't wait to talk about drones. And what Beta is doing is amazing.
it's so cool to hear the excitement that all of you have for what's going on in your classrooms. And Teresa, I think you nailed it when you said, anytime you can throw out something that's non sequitur, a little weird, and get those kids talking about it, you've got them hooked. And Chris, after hearing these teachers talk, are you ready to go sit in their classes and keep learning?
Marty, it's pretty exciting. First of all, thank you to all you educators out there. It's incredibly important to the workforce development as we look to the future. And I can't say enough the excitement and the passion that you bring, one to STEM and drones and aviation, and how critically important it is going to be to the future of our country and really, the national security as we look to, make sure that we have this next generation understanding the technology and the manufacturability. Like Keith and Steve, the work you're doing in the drone world, it's so incredibly important. We use drones. We've got a subscale model, a 1/5 scale of ALIA that we constantly are iterating on. It flies with the same flight control computer, the flight software, flight control software. We're helping on the automation aspect of that. That program helps lead what we do on the full scale bird that you see over on my shoulder. So it's just incredibly important. The one thing, we are actually partnering with some of the local technical colleges here. And obviously we're super passionate about aviation, but we've been talking to them about the skills that are transferable amongst all areas. And if you look at, every industry is using carbon fiber composites. So how to lay up composite materials and how to repair those. And, they're used in drones, they're used in all aspects of aviation, the advanced manufacturing with CNC machines. And, we as a country have to make sure that we are focused on how to harness this technology and the manufacturability, because DJI, we lost that. Like, we developed all that technology in our institutions in the US, but we lost the manufacturability of it. And it's owned by, a country that, doesn't share the same values and ideals that we all have here in the United States. So sorry to get on the soapbox, but I'm super thankful for all you educators and the work that you do and helping us, build the future going forward.
Awesome. Well, we've got a little bit of time for questions. Kelsey, I'm not seeing all the questions that are coming in. So if a question pops in, feel free to jump in. Steve and Keith, we kind of ran out of time earlier. So if you all have a question for Chris, jump in.
Well, I guess my big question for you, Chris, and you hit on it a little bit, but I know you're talking about future workforce and getting people to continue the growth of what your company has started. I mean, besides that, what other major hurdles do you have to getting your company from where it is now to having passengers and being, even more mainstream? Because you've, shown it can be done, but now we just need to, I'm sure you just want to take it up to the next level.
Yeah, Steve, it's a great question. And I'll tell you, we had the opportunity to be invited down to the Advanced Air Mobility Industry Day at the White House. And, our CEO founder, Kyle, talks to it much better than I can. Beta Technologies doesn't have all the answers. This has to be a government of whole approach, from the Department of Defense to the regulatory environment in the FAA, to private industry, to investors, to educators, to ensure that, we as a country don't lose the competitive advantage on this technology and the manufacturability of it, just because we're afraid to take a little bit of risk. The society's, I don't think ready to automatically adopt, 7,000-pound aircrafts flying with lithium-ion batteries, over urban populated areas. Hence the reason we kind of shifted and are focused on cargo logistics, flying in places that are less populated, and doing our best to make sure it's super reliable, pragmatic, safe. So that regulatory piece, nobody wants a safer aircraft than the, Beta Technologies. And we want the exact same thing as our FAA partners. We just got to figure out how to, sometimes maybe move the bureaucracy and aside and really focus on what matters. And then the supply chain is a huge issue, from copper that's going into our electric motors to, the rare earth materials with magnets and lithium in the batteries, right? So making sure that we're thinking about that circular approach and the recyclability of those materials at the end of life, and how we, leave the planet a better place for the next generation. So we're thinking a lot about that here at Beta Technologies going forward. But we don't have all the answers, and we need the education institutions to help us solve those. And we're super excited to partner with any and all of you going forward.
And that leads well into our next question from Dr. Sherlock. She wants to know, and I think Steve and Keith, this is probably directed at you. What's the best app to use for 3rd through 5th graders that have no experience with coding? We have stumped the panel.
That's actually a really good question. I haven't really been in the middle school as a teacher, but when I started off by mentioning about Swift Playgrounds, that is an iPad, and I do know a lot of schools do start off with iPads within their classroom because of the fact that it's push buttons as opposed to like having a Chromebook in their hands. But Swift Playground is, in my mind, a elementary start. And the fact that it's block-based really helps the kids think logically. And that's a critical piece when you talk about coding, is getting the kid to think logically, move 2 steps to the right, move 1 step to the left. And the kids have a difficult concept of just understanding that, especially when you work in a 360-degree world, when you look forward, and then you're thinking backwards and you're going the wrong direction. So to get kids to think, and it's the same thing when you play video games, especially our video games nowadays, it's all 360 degrees, and the kids know up is really down on the joysticks in a lot of ways. But I definitely encourage kids to start off with block-based, and that's what I do. I have another tool that I use in my classroom, that's an Ozobot. And an Ozobot is color-based. So I help the kids think logically using color. Then you elevate them over to a block base, and then you could start working on actual coding with, physical words and things like that. But
Teresa, do you have an idea?
Playground is a good one.
I do. I'm sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, you go ahead. I'll jump in after
So
you.
my middle schoolers, I have all of our special education students coding in middle school, and they are definitely on that 3rd grade level, probably, maybe even lower. We kind of start at Code Monkey Junior, where Code Monkey Junior lets them learn the patterns that Keith was just talking about, but then you can go into Code Monkey, which is going to take them into the next level of just basic coding. It's not drone coding, but if you just want them working on block coding and the ideas of how to get from one thing to the other, that's a really good program to start with.
Yeah, and that kind of builds right into what I was going to add to what Keith said. I mean, I think for me, when I start with, I work with 6th through 8th, but when I start with 6th graders at whatever level they're at, I always start with whether it's Code Monkey or whether I'm using Scratch. I start with just a very simple block-based coding without drones, and then jump into the drones afterwards. So that way they get used to dragging the little blocks together, and they pick it up faster than most of the teachers do. They just think that way because their whole life has been using that. So I think you'll be amazed once you start having them do it, that they'll find things online and say, hey, look, I changed it. So now instead of a bird and Flappy Bird, I got something else flying through. It's a dinosaur or whatever. They're amazing what they can do with it.
And
So
my
it has, I believe, a Scratch regular version, but they also have a Scratch Junior, I believe it's called. That's really beneficial for those elementary kids.
Hour of Code also has a grade, you can do it by grade level, and they have tutorials that go with it. So the video, you're not teaching the student how to do it. They can watch the video tutorial to learn how to start beginning stuff as well.
So I've got a two-part question that I'd like to ask first to Chris and then to the teachers. Chris, how important has failure along the way been to the overall success of what you all do?
That is at the core of our culture here at the company. We talk about a fail forward fast type of approach, and the only way that it works, Marty, is if you're super transparent and you have leadership that allows and values people that come forward and share those mistakes. And I can't tell you how important it is where we say, hey, no paper project ever fails, right? We just go out there and we are constantly micro experimenting. We're building it, we're flying it, we're testing it, we're breaking it, we're failing, we're sharing those mistakes, whether it was a design issue, whether it was an engineering decision, whether it was a human error. It's really at the core of our culture here at the company. And I think that's one of our competitive advantages that's allowed us to move at an incredibly fast pace and continue to innovate.
So for the TII teachers, especially doing coding and drones, there's a lot of failure along the way on that. How do you work with your kids and get them past those failures to the success?
I think that's a culture you have to build in your classroom. I mean, I say that to teachers all the time, that we need to teach our kids it's okay to fail as long as we're learning from what we do wrong. And I don't mean it's okay to fail a test, but even then, you come back and we'll try it again. But we see a lot of our kids, especially like in middle school, some of my best students don't continue along a STEM pathway because they're perfectionists, so they want to get everything just right. And when you get into some of those higher level classes, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to learn from them. And so I think that's something we just need to ingrain from the beginning. And I think with coding, that's a great way, because if you make a mistake, nobody gets hurt in that if you're, programming a game. And drones, yeah, you might break a propeller or two, but that's all fixable. And so just teaching that from the start.
I have a poster. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I have a poster in my room that says failure is not an option, is preferred.
Yeah, I've had students, they fly their drones and it hits the propeller would hit the side of the wall and it crashes. They hold it up, like it's a wounded dog paw or something, and they go, it broke, and they feel so horrible about it. And that's when I just magically come up and say, here's another propeller, put it on, and let's try it again. It's just one of those things that I don't get mad that something broke. It's like, we're going to try it again.
That is all awesome. Well, I would like to thank all of you for joining us tonight. Our panelists, you all did an awesome job, and hopefully everybody got some great ideas on how to incorporate some real world, incredibly cool stuff into their classroom. If you enjoyed the program tonight, be sure to follow the National Air and Space Museum and STEM in 30 on social media channels. It's a great way to hear about these programs, and we appreciate it when you talk to your friends and colleagues about these kinds of programs. This program will be posted on those social media channels, so feel free to share that out when it comes out. I think it's also going to be emailed out. And we want to thank all of you teachers for joining us tonight. We know how hard it is to have a whole week of work and then come in on your off time to make your classroom better. And all of us at the museum truly appreciate that. You all are inspiring the next generation of explorers. So thanks so much for tuning in. And Teresa, Chris, Steve, Keith, Kelsey, thank you all so much for tonight. This has been great.